Hey, everybody. Welcome to your Money Map, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income. I'm your host, Jean Chatzky. Very glad to have all of you along with me today. I got a full house, actually, because we're talking about a topic that we thought it would be fun to get a few different perspectives on at the same time. And that is not just retirement, but retirement as a couple. We all know it's a major life change, but when you've got a couple of people in the same household trying to do it simultaneously or close to simultaneously, it's an even bigger transition. And that's because from working together to craft a financial plan that meets your needs to making sure that you don't get on each other's nerves during all that free time, you're going to have a lot to navigate. We're going to be sitting down today to talk with both an expert and a couple about how to do this in the best possible way. Let me tell you just a little bit about my guests before I bring them in. Claire Ansberry is somebody that we have wanted to have on the show for a very long time. You probably know her byline. She writes the Turning Points column for the Wall Street Journal, which explores the various turning points in people's lives. She was previously the journal's Pittsburgh bureau chief. That's where she comes in on. She's written a couple of books, one of which is The Women of Troy Hill, The Back Fence Virtues of Faith and Friendship, about a community of women growing older together on a small hilltop neighborhood. And she's also co-author of the book Comes the Peace, My Journey to Forgiveness, about a young man's journey to reconnect with his family. Both books, by the way, are based on stories that she wrote for the Wall Street Journal. Claire, welcome to the show. Very happy to have you with me today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We are also joined by Brian Ashley and Ann Richter Ashley. And Brian and Ann are retired journalists. So not only do we have a house full, we got a house full of journalists. Ann, who is 69 years old, was a reporter and eventually anchor for a local CBS affiliate for nearly 40 years. She retired in 2017. Her husband, Brian, who is 67, started his career in radio, but eventually he went on to co-anchor the local news right alongside Ann. He retired in 2016 and then took a job as director of a local non-for-profit for a year and change, and officially retired in 2017. They lead a very active and what sounds like a very fun life in retirement, one that we will ask them to tell us all about. Brian and Ann, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much.
Jane.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I'm really, really glad to have all of you in the house. And Claire, let me start with you. You've made a career, as I said, Claire, about the turning points, writing about the turning points in many people's lives. Retirement is a big turning point, if not the biggest turning point. And as I said, it can be even more significant when you're doing it as a couple. As you have covered retirement in recent years, what are the things that have stood out to you most?
I think the biggest thing is that it's no longer monolithic. I mean, you reach the age of 65 and everybody can do things differently. There are more people who are choosing to keep working. There are more people who have retired and then decided to come back into the workplace. So I just think there are more people working than they expected. And even if they're a couple, they're not retiring at the same time. They may be different ages. Couples, they have more wealth. They are more mobile. So it's not a single stage either. It's a series of stages in retirement.
I want to come back to that notion of a series of stages because I think it's an important point and also an important financial question. But before I do that, Anne, you retired first. So tell us a little bit about your journey into retirement and how how Brian eventually joined you there.
Well, I loved my job as an anchor at WWNY TV in Watertown. I mentored lots of young journalists who came through the door and out the door onto their own careers. Absolutely loved it, and I was scared to death to take that step into retirement. I just thought, what am I going to do with myself? And I found that I walked out the door holding my head high. Nice big send-off party. Got up the next morning. I felt the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. And then the day after that, I knew I didn't want to get into the same routine. The day after that, I hit the road and I traveled for about 3 years. Went to New York first, went to Maine, state of Washington. We went to Ireland and, Berlin and Prague, and just, it had to be different. It couldn't be the same routine. You didn't want to get up at the same time. I don't know. And then, and I was in Boston, and this was about a year and a half later. Brian called me and said, I think I'm going to retire. And I'm like, no, you can't retire, because I was having such a great time in retirement. It was very empowering to do it on your own and to travel by yourself or with friends and family. I said, we'll talk about it when I get home. And by the time I got home, he had already let them know he was retiring. I'm like, okay.
Man, you jumped the gun on her.
It was tough to go to work every day, and knowing Ann was having fun out there and doing all these things, and I'm, then pulling up my peanut butter and jelly sandwich at lunch and going, boy, what's wrong with this? And picture, and eventually got to the point where I said, I think I've accomplished everything I want to do in my career, and now it's time to maybe cash in a few of the chips and enjoy things on my terms.
Claire, is what they're describing typical as far as the retirement stories that you hear from people?
I hear a real mix. I mean, there are some people who, after 6 months of doing all of the home remodeling plans and the little chores or playing golf, where they feel a need to do something else. And I think part of that is, maybe not thinking through what is the next stage. What am I going to do with the next chapter? Again, it's sort of those phases. Like the first phase is the honeymoon phase, isn't this great? We're doing all of this. But there are some people who just feel like I need to do something else. And they will go back to sort of an encore career. And often it's for a nonprofit, or where the nonprofit can't afford their skills and they still want to contribute, and it gives them a sense of purpose. So I've seen that. And I've also seen people who retire who have to go back to work financially because they underestimated their expenses, or they're nervous that they didn't save enough for a long life. And also people who left, a woman who actually got rid of all of her career clothes because she thought, I'm never going back in the office. And then a few years later, she was like, I'm a people person. I want to be back with people. So she went back to an administrative job after being a global salesperson, just because she wanted to be back with people. So it is a mix. It really is.
If you're watching this conversation and you'd like to weigh in on retirement and the issues that we're talking about today, feel free to do that. You can just post in the comments. I'll weave your comments or your questions into the conversation. Brian, what Claire was talking about in terms of leaving the long-term job and then taking something else in a nonprofit, she could have been describing you. What was your transition like?
Well, we live in a military community here. The 10th Mountain Division is located about 10 miles away from where we are. And so we're very deeply involved in what's going on out there. So the position I went to revolved around advocating for the 10th Mountain Division with our politicians and the people in Washington who pulled the strings. So from a subject matter, whatever, that was fairly simple. That was fairly easy. I will tell you where it really kind of rubbed it, a little bit hard was going from the structure that we had in a newsroom with a news director, Simon editor, and Ann as the sort of the managing editor of our newscasts, to a job which had basically a board of directors and multiple people giving you input. That's a bit of a change. So the actual structure was something that I had to get used to. Don't think I was totally comfortable in it, but it was a situation where the subject matter was okay. So I had a much smoother transition into it. But that is something we see. We see a lot of people who aren't necessarily in the journalism field for the long haul, and they are moving into um, public relations, HR positions. They're doing all kinds of different things that are, they're completely different than what they were doing before, but they seem to be transitioning into it very, very well. I don't know whether that's we're the exception to the rule, but we had a fairly smooth transition.
Claire, I know you've done some reporting recently on what the Alliance for Lifetime Income has dubbed Peak 65, or the Peak 65 zone. The fact that we're now at this period of time where more people, more baby boomers, are turning 65 than at any point in history. The economic impact of this is large. The impact on this generation is also large. What are you seeing in terms of characteristics of these peak 65ers and how their experience has been different?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when you think about, I mean, when somebody says peak, it sounds, but when you think about more than 11,200 people, Americans, are turning 65 every day this year, which is a huge amount. And, for the first time, 65-year-olds are going to outnumber children 15 and under. So that is really interesting. I mean, some of the data that they're showing is that like nearly 20% of Americans 65 and older were employed in 2023, which is nearly double the share of 35 years ago. So again, more people are working. There, the income, the wealth is the medium net wealth or worth. I mean, of those 65 to 74 stood at 410,000 in 2022, and that's up from 282,000 in 2010, inflation adjusted. So people 65 at this age group is wealthier than earlier age groups at 65. They can expect to live another 20 years, so they're healthier. They're more active, physically active. So it's a group that's working, tends to be working. That's different. They're wealthier. They're more physically active. They're healthier. They're also, maybe surprising or not surprisingly, tend to be living alone, more divorces, the 65 and older age group. The divorce rate more than tripled among those 65 and older. I asked somebody why that might be, and they said, well, with longevity, if you're in an unhappy marriage, you may think, I'm not sure I want to stick around for another 20 years with this person. So those were things that stood out to me. I think the other thing too was that people were expecting to retire at a certain age and found out that they had to retire earlier because of they were let go, downsized, or that they had to care for an aging relative or themselves, their health field. So those were two unexpected things.
Just to follow up on what you said, the fact that this generation is wealthier, that doesn't necessarily line up with the fear that we read about so often, that people believe that they have the possibility of running out of money in retirement. How do you think those two factors can coexist? And then, Anne, I'm going to ask you if that's a fear for you guys.
Well, I think the reason they can coexist is because the net worth that we're talking about is sort of a snapshot. It's where they are now. So that is taking into they have more money to like that will take into their investments. It's also including their housing value and real estate, values and their stock portfolio. So they have a lot right now, but I think the sense of not having enough is kind of looking in the future. So they're okay right now, and they could, 65 to 75, whatever that sort of short-term first stage of retirement, they're doing well. I think the concern and the stress is thinking, okay, if I live till 95, how am I going to manage that? And when I'm looking at in-home healthcare costs rising, 12% a year, that makes people anxious and nervous.
It makes me anxious and nervous, I gotta say. And does it make you anxious and nervous, or have you planned your way through this adventure for as long as it lasts?
Well, I have to tell you that WWNY TV was owned by the late, great Midwest newspaper man, Howard Brown. And Howard felt strongly that his employees should have access to sound financial assistance. So he contracted with Francis Investment Council in Brookfield, Wisconsin. And this bubbly young woman named Kelly Send would come to the station once a year, meet with us individually to go over our portfolios and talk us through whatever we needed to know. She would also hold group meetings to talk about trends, where the market was going, what to look out for, that sort of thing. And because of Howard Brown and Kelly Send, we are in a very good position. Kelly said we could retire at 60. And I'm like, I don't think so. No way. There's no way that money's going to last that long, right? And I did retire at 62, and Brian was
about 62 when I
Yeah.
retired.
And we just met with our new financial consultant last week, who told us we definitely have enough money till age 99.
99.
And I'm like, but we're not going to live that long. Can we spend some of it now?
I think what happened was I transitioned from 20 years in radio over to the television station. And I had worked for companies that were very concerned about not seeing employees lose money. So their investment philosophy was very conservative and few choices, if any. And when I left to come over and transfer my retirement account to the television station, I actually almost broke down into tears because there was so little that had happened over those years that I worked. We'd missed several big rallies on Wall Street, and we had just missed opportunities. But when it came to Channel 7 and we sat down with these people, we decided to put a bigger chunk of our salaries away, and we made sure that was a discipline that we followed. We didn't waver from it. We were long haulers, if you want to call it. We were gonna ride the waves of Wall Street and not panic when it dropped in 2008, and not get over exuberant when it has risen to the highest level we've ever seen, because we believe that that discipline has benefited us well, and we're now enjoying the benefits of having committed those funds back in the day when we said, should we go to the Rolling Stones concert at $100, $200 a ticket, or we'll just listen to the record, which I bought for like $9.99. So that money stayed in a good place and helped us grow. And we're now in a place where we can take the money out, and then we can even go see Bruce Springsteen for $350 a ticket.
I hope you're going to see both when they're back on this year. Claire, one of the interesting nuances about couples is we tend to, all of the gray divorces that you were talking about notwithstanding, we tend to sort of believe that couples are going to be on the same page about important life issues like retirement. And I shared with you, I have a story that I clipped from the Wall Street Journal from many years ago with the headline, "He says Maine, she says Florida." And it was all about a couple who couldn't decide when to retire, where to retire, how they wanted to spend their time in retirement. Do you often find couples at loggerheads?
I think that there is so much more different ways that people do relationships now, where in the past that might have been, no, we can't stay, we can't be apart, whereas now it might be like, you know what, okay, I really like the north, you like the south, we can make this work, we can, you know, you could go down there for a few months, I can stay up here. I just think that people are more accepting of doing relationships and family in a different way, and if they have the freedom and the flexibility, they can do that. I think there's just more acceptance that it doesn't have to be all one way or all the others. I do think that there is more of an acceptance of doing relationships differently and doing retirement differently too. Yeah, but there are also people who love the adventures together. I have a colleague who, he and his wife retired and they got on their bikes and they went across the country. I can't even imagine doing that, but they both love doing that and they made it work. But, you know, not everybody's like that. I also talked to another couple, and this was really unusual for caregiver or aging, is the husband lives in Texas or Arizona, and because his mom is aging, so he's there. His wife lives in Pennsylvania because that's where their children and grandchildren live. And they each have a caregiving responsibility, where they're living in different states now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I've been reading about your colleagues who are bicycling across the country, the Kreider Yoders, and they are chronicling their adventures for the Wall Street Journal, and it's been really fun to follow along with them. And you talked about traveling on your own when you first retired and Brian wasn't retired. Did people look at you funny?
No, and I found it very empowering because as a couple for so long, we always traveled together. And I would just sort of follow Brian. Okay, he'd hand me the tickets, you know, get in that line kind of thing. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I got to do this by myself. And like I said, it was so empowering. And then I just came back wanting more and more of that.
And,
Yeah,
and aside
still-
from the PB&J, Brian?
Well, you know, Anne has her interests, I have my interests, and we have our joint interests. And there are times when, you know, Anne has, you know, I can tell you, she just came off a year-long effort. She was one of the lead people in helping to organize the eclipse observations in our community because we were in the path of totality and we were expecting tens of thousands of people here. And Anne did an enormous amount of outreach to get the community prepared for that. Now, on the other hand, I'm doing other things to raise money to restore a historic bandstand in our park here in Watertown. So we have those, you know, we have those separate interests that we put our energies into, but we also bring our energies together. You know, whether it was when Anne was traveling or when I was working, you know, we were still focused on things that we were, you know, doing together and things that we would support and volunteer for and everything else. So yeah, the PBJ, you know, was okay for a while. I am really, I'm kind of the cook of the family. So I learned to make more than PBJ.
Well, and mind you, we worked together side by side for 20 years. So,
And I have the bruises on my leg to show it where she
Oh.
kicked me under the table.
so I mean, you come home from work, you don't want to hang out together, you know, you want to just go off and do your own thing, and you go off and do your own
Yeah.
thing, and then come back together when you needed to.
Yeah, there was a benefit in being able to have the same language and talk about, you know,
Yeah.
common issues. But yeah, we still managed to take separate interests and do them together. She would bounce ideas off me. I would bounce ideas off of her. And, we've always felt like we were a team. This is as a marriage, sure. But, when you're sitting on the set in a TV station in the midst of a crisis or something like that, I want to trust the person who's sitting next to me and vice versa. So at that level, we had a trust and a cooperative effort. And in everything else, we've done the same thing. We've done the same thing when it comes to our finances and where we're going to expend money and how much we need and all of those things. But I think every person has their own, or each couple has their own situation that they're in. I will tell you, it's funny. Some people think that when you retire and you live here in the northern climes, in the Northeast, you're immediately leaving for Florida. And I would see people and they go, "Haven't you gone to Florida yet?" And I'm like, "I'm not going to Florida. I like it here. We enjoy the winters here. So we're not just bailing from the community and leaving. We're invested here. We've been here for a long time. And we're going to keep investing in our community to make it better until we can."
One of the things that Claire brought up earlier was this sort of phases of retirement. Some people have described them, at least in financial terms, as looking kind of like a smile. That you start in the early stages of retirement, the go-go stages, where you're spending more money because you're traveling more and you're doing more. Then you phase into the no-go slow go stages, where you're doing a little less and spending a little less. And the no-go stages, you're not going all that many places, but it can be more expensive in terms of healthcare. Claire, do you see those stages, as we've come to understand them, holding up?
I do. And I think in the also in, and I think it's both in sort of the first stage, but more so maybe in the second stage, is sort of the big decisions of the first is maybe just traveling, having fun, and that's not for everybody. But and spending, and then sort of the decisions of, should we sell the house? Should we move? What should we move to? And we just had a story about how boomers were holding on to their 3 and 4 bedroom homes because they can't afford to move. But there are big decisions to be made. So then that's also such a preparation stage, and so important of just making sure everything is in order, and that your kids are, they know what's going on, and keep them posted on your finances. But I do see it as, those stages hold through.
What are your next stages going to look like, Anne?
Wow. Well, I would say, after hearing Claire, we're in the first stage. We still have that big smile on our face. And I like to think we're still young. But I do understand the next phases will eventually arrive. Our house is paid off. We love our house. We love our community. So I can't imagine going anywhere else and starting over at this age, meeting new friends. We have friends who just announced that they're moving south for good. And I'm kind of in shock, because I think it must be really hard to start over when you're in your early 70s. How do you meet friends? Most people have their established friends. That scares me, more than anything else. I guess monetarily, since our Alex tells us we've got enough money till 99, I would hope that he's taking into consideration, health issues and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But we're pretty healthy, and I'm not worried about it at this point.
And 99 could be just getting started. Claire, you recently wrote a piece about Dr. Gladys McGarry, a 103-year-old who continues to work. And in your reporting, you talked about why it's important to find passion in life's later years, whether it's working or another activity that you're interested in. First of all, what was that experience of reporting like? And why do you think that passion is such a key factor?
Well, she was amazing. One of the things that struck me the most, I mean, aside from the fact that she's 103 and she practiced holistic medicine her whole life, at a time, becoming a doctor at a time when there weren't many opportunities for women. And then her husband of 42 years asked for a divorce right before she was 70, and she had to go out and make her whole new life um, and continue her practice. But she decided to do that because she felt what she was doing was important. Again, the sense of purpose. And because that helps with your health and well-being. For her, it gives her a reason to, get up every day. And she has for her 102nd birthday, she got a bike, an adult tricycle bike that she rides in her yard. So she was very inspiring. She's very well read. She's resilient. She's incredibly resilient, and she takes care of herself. She was amazing. She was an inspiration. So
That's one of the things that I like about reporting about this phase of life. I do find so many examples of resilience and so many people to emulate. I thought as we start to wrap this up, I'd love to ask all of you for a little advice for people who are either just entering retirement or looking at retirement down the road. If you were going to give people some tips from your vantage point about how to get it right, what would you say to them? And Brian, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I guess saying getting it right. Well, getting it right for myself might be far different than what other people might consider getting it right. But we've had a number of philosophies about how we approached retirement. We were disciplined. We made sure that we made a consistent contribution to our retirement funds. We took advantage of all of the opportunities that our employer gave us for matching funds. We kept an eye on things, but we didn't panic. You can get out of the market at the bottom of the it's that buy low, sell high. You can play that game all day long, and you're probably going to be a loser. I'm not an expert in the markets, but I would say that staying the course, being disciplined about how you invest, talking to people who are smarter than you about investing and taking their advice to heart are ways that you can plan and feel comfortable. And way you've reduced the stress level. You've really taken off the edge, and you go, okay, I'm confident. I feel good. Yeah, I can go to 99, although I can't imagine what it will look like in 99. But that's just one of the things.
And I would say, don't be afraid to reinvent yourself. I mean, I was a journalist all these years. I'm not going to sit down and write stories anymore. I picked up a new hobby that I just kind of discovered when I was vacationing in Maine. I volunteer at a local land trust, and I said to them, I don't want to do anything that I have to think about. So I'll go in around the holidays and just stuff envelopes, that for their annual giving campaign. Um, I try to get out in nature. Um, I started playing pickleball, and I've met 3 women who I absolutely adore. I never would have met them in my prior life. So get out there, meet new people, try something different, and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, we've always had this philosophy of work hard, play hard. If you work hard, you deserve the rewards. When they present themselves, go out and enjoy them. We've being in journalism, we've had all kinds of opportunities to do things that most people don't get to do. Ride a hot air balloon, fly an F-16 fighter jet, things like that are really really cool. But outside, we're sailors. We were sailboat racers. So when it came to working hard, we really worked hard. But when it came to playing hard, we also made sure that was a part of our life, so that we could balance out the two, and again take off those high peaks of stress or whatever, and make sure that we were in good shape. Because you can play to everybody else's plan or game, but if you're not playing to your own, you're gonna probably end up losing.
Absolutely. Claire, from your perspective, what's the most important couple of things that people need to remember to do?
I think being conservative and expecting to live longer, and costs of living and prices to keep rising, and with that being flexible, because you may expect to work until a certain age, but you may get laid off or have health problems. Um, I think to understand that retirement's in stages. I also think it's really important to invest in your health and not just your retirement fund. And I mean physical health, diet, exercise, sleep, but also your mental well-being and figuring out how to be engaged for that next chapter, because the idea of purpose matters. And then, like, the final thing is enjoy, because we all know life is short, and just savor the moments and the time that you can with family and friends, because that is truly the most precious thing.
Fabulous advice all around. Claire and Brian, thank you so much for doing this.
Well,
Thank
you for
you.
the opportunity.
And just a reminder to please keep reading Claire's work in the Wall Street Journal. Her column is called Turning Points. You're going to want to look for that. Claire, is there anywhere else you'd like to point us to check out your work?
Wall Street Journal, Turning Point. That's good.
That'll do it. And if you're looking
Twitter,
for more,
LinkedIn, yeah.
Fantastic.
X LinkedIn. Sorry.
If you're looking for more information on this broadcast, you can always check out our website at protectedincome.org. And this conversation in particular, protectedincome.org/Ansberry. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Hi, thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you.